So good evening, everybody. We are pleased to begin a brand new chapter, which is Perek Nun Bey's 52nd chapter of Tanya. As we mentioned time and again, namely for the newcomers, this previous class or classes of the previous chapter, and on all, for that matter, all chapters of Tanya up till now, you can see it on the original website, which is tanyaonline.com. TanyaOnline.com, as we as well mention time to time that it's easy to follow these classes simply because there's a separate scroll bar for the text and also easy access to all the previous classes which come up in the same fashion. So we begin Perek Nun Bey. Now I do mention these previous chapters just because, as we mentioned, that from Perek Nun Aleph we noted that from Perek Nun Aleph to the end of Tanya, which is Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, Nun Gimel, the Alter Rebbe kind of sectionalizes these last three chapters as kind of a new idea. He goes back to a previous quote from that Yenuka, which he brought in Perek Lamed Hey, which becomes a basis for a revolutionary appreciation of the Avodah of the Yid down here in this world, of his learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and so on and so forth. And Alter Rebbe expands on this Yenuka, Hey, Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches. I mean, this becomes a central point in the entire Tanya, based on those words of that Yenuka. Again, the Yenuka brought in Zayar. You can see it towards the beginning of Perek Lamed Hey, 35th chapter. And Alter Rebbe concludes the entire Tanya, going back to the Yenuka, quote, focusing in on a particular expression of the Yenuka, which is the idea of Shechina, dwelling. What does it mean? Hashem's dwelling place isn't this, there's the molecular, it's everything, every part of the Aretz, and so to Shamayim as a Shamayim as Aretz Animale molecular Tzkvedi. Hashem is everywhere. There's no place to avoid it because Baruch Hu, what does it mean? And then again, this is the basis of the Alter Rebbe's entry into this new explanation, which he felt very strongly to conclude the entire Likutei Amarim with this biur, with this new explanation on what does it mean. Shechina, Sheichin. Hashem is Sheichin, dwells in this particular place. Apparently, there's no place to avoid it. Baruch Hu. And with this, he begins. Well, this begins in a very elaborate manner. As we spoke also, it's unique that a full page and a half, the Alter Rebbe enters into a mashal, into a parable, a metaphor, and he doesn't skip even one detail as of the metaphor in a way that that is quite expansive, especially for Likutei Amarim. We mentioned the other day for the Likutei Amarim, which is known to be Torah Shebiksav, Teres Achsidus, of everything is every letter and every word, every letter, every nuance is with maximum precision. We mentioned this also in the very beginning of the Tanya of the Alter Rebbe, different documented stories of the Alter Rebbe, calculating not only a line, a word, but even a letter to add, to distract, to add or to remove, and so on. So the Alter Rebbe to take almost a page and a half of this expansive mashal, because the Alter Rebbe wants us to have that clarity on the nimshal to the maximum, to this extent that, like I say, even this, because he begins this after he asks the question, what does it mean, Asheras Hashchina, the dwelling of the divine presence? He says, he brings the pasuk mipsari echzalakah, for my flesh I can appreciate and know Hashem. And this, and as he brings this pasuk, so he goes on, as I mentioned, within this very lengthy metaphor, explaining how the mashal, in other words, the mashal to the nimshal, is in all its exact detail, the way it's manifests, and the way it unfolds by the human being. And the kocha mamash, in the second part of Nun Aleph, he starts explaining how it is on high. And with this, he's going to lead in to the answer itself, which is, what is the concept of Ashras Ashchina? What is it supposed to mean? Hashem dwells in a particular place. Again, that would be the answer after he introduces in Perek Nun Aleph the metaphor and the Bekocha Mamash on the message, the way it unfolds on high. We start appreciating the Shachanti B'Seicham, this idea that the Eibishter Hashem dwells in a particular place, and then he concludes again a whole new message, how we're meant to look at our Avodah, our learning Torah, our doing mitzvahs, generally our Avodas Hashem, and our serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So right now we're holding Bekocha Mamash, which is the Perek Nun Beis, where the Alter Rebbe is introducing over here in this chapter another dimension of the mashal, of the metaphor. If you recall, in the metaphor, the Alter Rebbe says the first station where the nefesh enters into the human being is in the brain, which we know as the nerve system. The nefesh doesn't function, doesn't unfold, if you will, in the entire system of the body without entering and establishing itself in the brain, again known to us as the nerve system, which via the nerve system everything else is able to function. Everything's rooted in the nerve system accordingly. So this detail the Alter Rebbe is introducing in Perek Nun Beis, which means the second part of Perek Nun Aleph, where he begins with Kocha Mamash, which comes right after a page and a half of the detailed metaphor, the detailed mashal example, and that refers to the first part, namely the first part of the mashal, that, as Alter Rebbe emphasized in this metaphor, that the nefesh does not enter into the body without entering or prior to that. Let's take a step back. The Alter Rebbe points out in the mashal that the nefesh, prior bichlal to entering into the guf, is completely removed, completely abstract, completely pashut, the lashon Alter Rebbe, pashut b'tachlis apshitus, or pashut umufshut mikol tzir gashmi. It has no image, it has no form. There's no such a thing within the nefesh to say that, oh, here is the energy of the brain, here is the energy of the eye, here's the energy of the audio, here's the energy of walking, because that doesn't exist in the nefesh prior to it's entering into the body. It's just a core of life, a core of energy. And because it doesn't have it within itself, so you cannot identify, therefore justifiably you say it's pashut umufshut completely, because even it had this tzir, even in a subtle type of manner. In other words, there was a subtle energy which could be identified of, let's say, meichin, ayin, eisen, koach hilach knows the koach of seeing, the koach of hearing, the koach of understanding, intellectualizing, or walking, and so on. So then you cannot say truly that it's pashut or mufshat, completely pashut, because somewhat, even subtly, it has that expression. And when it enters the body, then it would unfold, it would come to a full state of manifestation. But you cannot call it pashut. But the Alter Rebbe makes it very clear that the nefesh, prior to its entering into the system, there's nothing there, nothing at all to say, that part of the nefesh is more a superior part of the nefesh, because it's associated with the meichin, with the brain. This is associated with the heart, and this is associated with the eye or the ear, and so on. You can't say that at all. That tells us the connection to the brain or to the ear or to the eye is exactly the same. There's no preference, there's no priority within the nefesh of the koach hahiluch, the koach of walking, the koach of breathing, the koach of seeing, hearing rather, let's say, or the koach of understanding, appreciation. And therefore its relation to it is exactly the same. And I say this again, emphasize, because this is the first part that Alter Rebbe makes it clear in the nimshal, meaning in the message, that when you deal with the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't say that within HaKadosh Baruch Hu he's inclined to Eilam Misalyein more than to Eilam Mistachteinim. Again, we gave the different examples which Alter Rebbe gave in Perek Mem Ches and Tanya, which brings it out so clear. Basically, if you recall, we said like is infinity touched more by a trillion more than by one? If it is, and kind of it's excited over a trillion more than 1 or 2 or 10, so it's not truly infinite. From the perspective of infinity, 1 in a trillion is exactly the same. And this is Alter Rebbe saying, because it's in the, as we find it in the nimsh, in the mashal, that the nefesh prior to its entering into the system is pashut mufshit mikol tzir gashmi. That tells us that its relation, its connection, and so to say, its excitement for any other kaichas, the way it would unfold in the body is exactly the same, because it's pashut mufshit mikol tzir gashmi. And so too in the nimshal. When we're talking about a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the way the Eibush just formed himself by himself prior to entering into the system, or that active being the active Mahava Machayim Mekayim at any level, the way is again for himself by himself. There is no excitement of Eilam Esalyenim more than Eilam Estachteinim, the supreme and superior worlds over the inferior worlds. They're exactly the same as the Lashon Alter Rebbe. K'meishu sasam and elam b'tachteinim, so too he's sasam and elam b'elyanim. He's completely concealed from the elyanim. The supreme world is just exactly the same as he's concealed from the inferior worlds. Again, we elaborated on this also, and especially the Alter Rebbe's culmination in this one line after he brings that point home. He says, "V'nimtza k'meishu matzu sham," kind of on a comforting note. Shmoit Matzu Sham, a very comforting note. Matzu Sham, Kach Nimtza B'Tachteinim Mamish. The whole core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here, just like it's up there, exactly the same way. But this part, and then the Alter Rebbe goes on, just like in the mashal, you have this nefesh which is pashut mikol tzir gashmi, and it enters into the system, and only once it enters the system, then everything takes its place, which is the kayach lireis and the ayin lireis and ayin lishmeh, as he goes on in the mashal, so too in the nimshal, in the message, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu enters kaviyach into the system, then there is the emanation of Elam Atzilus and the creation of Elam Abriya and Yitzir and Asiya. Even though as he culminates the Perek, he said that in the end of the day, everything is ultimately naturally connected. In the Ma'atzilon, in the emanator, in Tzad Baruch Hu, this is the final words of Perek Nel, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, we spoke about that detail as well. But the difference, when there's the commencement, when is there this process, the beginning of, to the definition of Eilam Esalyenim, Tachteinim, the supreme worlds, the inferior worlds, that's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mamshichu Meir B'Bchinas Gilui Me'ahalam, similar to the Nefesh. When it enters into the system, then it starts evolving from a state of concealment to a state of revelation and a full state of manifestation within the system of the human being, and so to bring to the Nimshal. Again, he explains this, how it fits perfectly in the Nimshal as well. Again, we're saying this so brief now, just to click away, literally click away, to see the message of Perek Nun Aleph. But now, if you remember, in Perek Nun Aleph, one of the details of the mashal was that the first entry of the nefesh into the system of the human being is that it enters, again, the main station, if you will, where it connects with the system of the body, is in the brain. Again, known to us as the nerve. The evolution of that is the nerve system, the nefesh, again, namely situated in the brain, and from the brain everything unfolds, which means all the chayas which exists on all the nivraim, or all in the mashal, everything that enters and unfolds rather in the system of the human being is all kind of packaged in the way it is in the brain. So again, as we mentioned that 2 points. Alter Rebbe himself says the first thing is the core of the nefesh primarily enters into the meichin, into the brain system, but he says more so that everything else which would ultimately unfold is also kind of packaged in and condensed into the meichin. And again, in one word, really, if you want to encapsulate this message, the way it unfolds in the mashal, that's the idea. That is the idea of the nerve system. which that is the container of the nefesh, and everything else is connected to the nerve system, and is condensed into the nerve system, and eventually from the nerve system it evolves and enters into all the limbs and organs and faculties and talents within the human being, allows it to unfold in a way that they come as well to a state of expression, in a way that they are manifested, they express themselves with their unique type of expression, if it's the eye, if it's the ear, and so on. But so this detail, the first station, the first entry of the nefesh into the system comes through the meichin. Now the Alter Rebbe takes that detail through the brain again, and that detail the Alter Rebbe expands on in Perek Nun Beis in the 52nd chapter. And with this is the way the Alter Rebbe begins the 52nd chapter. That just like this, the way it unfolds, this detail rather, which we didn't speak about yet, that the nefesh entering into the system through the meichin, through the nerve system, through the brain, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts vitalizing and being the mahave or machayim mekayim, or the lashon of the Rebbe mamshich or meir mebchinas gilu me'ahelim into Elamis, and again therein you find the differences of Elamis Elyenim and Elamis Tachteinim. The first step is into Hashem's meichin. Hashem Himself coming into the meichin system, kaviyachol l'mayla, and from there everything unfolds. What is the meichin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? As He's going to be explicit later. The meichin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we know that's Hashem's wisdom, Chachma Bina Das rather, is Hashem's Torah. Hashem's Torah is Chachmasei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's desires, known as would be Ritzayne Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, this Chachmasei Ritzayne HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's where the HaKadosh Baruch Hu entered via the Chachmasei Ritzayne Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chachmasei Binase V'daite, clearly focusing on Meichin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again known to us as the Torah, and ultimately the mitzvahs. That's where Hashem comes in, which becomes, so to say, the main station to which the Eibishter's energy will ultimately unfold. And from there it starts unfolding and taking root, taking position, ultimately creating, emanating, creating, which would be Atzilus B'ri Yitzir Asiyah and so on. And ultimately this world, this physical world. But without that entry into the meichin, into the nerve system, Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Chachmasi Binase V'daiti, even Ritzayne Chachmasi Binase V'daiti, focusing on meichin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Chachma, the Hashem's Tein, Hashem's mitzvahs, there would stand no chance, Kaviyachal, that anything would be created at all. Just like the way it's in the system of the person, it's only because the nefesh enters into the meichin, into the brain system, that's when everything could unfold. And why the brain system? Again, we spoke about them because it's a very delicate, extremely delicate position. It's a extremely delicate system, the meichin, and therefore it stands as this interface between the nefesh, which on its own is completely removed and completely pashut, umufshat mikol tzir gashmi, and then eventually the function of all the faculties of the body, which again they're very detailed and very identified. So the meichin, which is a very sensitive type of system, stands as the interface between the neshama and the guf, and the entire function of the guf with all its faculties accordingly. And so too with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the Eibishter Hashem is so removed. And as the Lashon is again in the end of the Perek Nun Aleph, Ein Sof Baruch Hu is completely Muhusi Vatzmusi rather Shalein Sof Baruch Hu Shava Bel Yenim Etachtenim, because it's so completely transcendent, because it's completely removed. In order the Eibishter should become this kind of a turnaround, to be mamshich or meir, to be the mahava machayim mekayim, to bring life in existence, and to be an emanator, namely creator of all the elements, there has to be something which is kind of an interface between the Eibishter, the Hashem, the way He's formed Himself by Himself, ultimately to become this creator. What is that? It's the nerve system, it's the brain system, Kaviyachal with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately that's the Torah, as the Alter Rebbe is going to go on explaining a little later within the chapter. So we continue in the very beginning, Perek Nun Beis, just like by the soul of man. The main revelation of the energy of the nefesh is in the brain, and all the limbs receive their light and their koyach, which shines to them from the source of the revelation of this energy which is in the brain. When we come to the nimshal, which is the message when we're speaking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the main revelation of the life and energy which is drawn from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to vitalize these worlds, the habruim and the creations in this, with these shabahem within these worlds. Is initially invested and part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Hani is Baruch, may they be blessed, Anikra b'shem Meichin, which are known as Meichin. In other words, Hashem may be blessed is Chachma, Zeratzon, Chachma, Binasa V'daitei, is where Hashem's energy initially enters, which is known to be called Meichin. So you see over here, Ratzon. We mentioned Ratzon as well, as he points out over here when he speaks about the initial entry, Kaviyachol, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into this, into creation, emanation and creation, goes through, it's stationed, and it enters in Hashem's Ritzoni v'chachmas v'nasa, and he groups it all into the word Meichin, how's Ratz and Meichin, but again, because you're dealing with Torah mitzvahs, which you see the blend of Hashem's Chachma, Hashem has desire, Hashem has in other words, Hashem's understanding dictates, as Lashon al Terebe, if you recall in Perek Hey and Tanya, that Reuben says like this, and Hashem is like this, the Psak Din, Hashem's Ratzin, which ultimately would evolve from this Chochmah Bina Das HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though the Ratzin on its own is higher, therefore the word Ratzin comes before, but nonetheless, as we can all appreciate, when it comes to Torah mitzvahs, it's all packaged together. That it's saying which ultimately they're all grouped and they're all packaged in the name of Meichin, Hanikra b'shem Meichin, which is called the name Meichin. So again, just pointing out why he adds Ratzin. But let's move on. This is invested in Hashem's Torah and Hashem's mitzvahs, because Hashem's Torah, Hashem's mitzvahs, this is Hashem's nerve system. Kaviyachol. This is Hashem's Chochmah Bina of Das. What is Torah called? Torah is called Chochmah Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is called Bina Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is Bechlal associated with Chochmah Bina and Das. Ki hi Chochmaschem u'binaschem le'nei kol ha'amim. Why is it Chochmaschem u'binaschem le'nei kol ha'amim? Because they're anchored and they're rooted in the Chochmah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're anchored in the root in the Bina of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and so too in the Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Kaviyachol, the Eibishter's entry into, so to say, in the system has to go through Hashem's nerve system, which is Hashem's Chochmah, or Bin Ratzin, Chochmah, Bina Das, which this is invested. This is really the spirit of Torah mitzvahs, as he makes it even clearer later. But Gili, then, once Hashem enters into this Chochmah, Bin Yosef V'daitei, so then you already have the ability, Kaviyachol, from as this stands, so to say, is the interface between the Eibishter, the way he is, forms all by himself, transcendent of all this, and eventually becomes the Mahava Machayim Mekayim of all elements, so to say, involved. And then there's elements Alyenim, elements Tachtenim, again, as he elaborated in Perek Nun Aleph. But again, the interface between the interface over here would be Hashem's Chochmah Bina V'das, just like Lahavdil, the way it works by the human being. Because of the greatness and the sensitivity of Meichin, of that unique, again, Meichin is not just another faculty. Meichin is a very sensitive domain. And again, that's the reason why it stands as an interface between the Nefesh and the entire system, which we all know and appreciate, the sensitivity of the nerve system, the sensitivity of the Meichin, sensitivity of the brain, which is more than a vital faculty, a vital organ, a vital faculty. So this is so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu invests in the system through his entry into his own Meichin, which is Hashem's Meichin is Torah mitzvahs. And then comes the Gilu Kol Sam Shachazor Makar Chayis Shalom Smekam Kol Echad Beprotis, and only then do you have the Chayis, the energy coming down and evolving, which is Mahav and Machai Mekai, which is life and existence to all the Eilamis, to all the worlds, and not only the worlds in general, but all the details which exist in every single Eilam. It's ha'ora, it's a ray which comes from this source, similar to the light which becomes manifest from the sun. So you have the Baal of the sun, which is the core energy of the sun, and then you have the ha'ora, which we appreciate, the light, the warmth, and so on. That's our ha'ora, it's a ray coming from the sun. This is similarly. And so too, when it comes from the koiches, in other words, the energy of the limbs and organs and faculties and talents of the body, ultimately come from the brain, from the nerve system. And this is similar to HaKadosh Baruch by the way is by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, from Meichin over here, is speaking about the Nimshal, speaking about the Meichin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That everything evolves only subsequent. We're not dealing with time over here, but subsequent in expression, in evolution, comes only after the entry, Kaviyachol, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on his own Meichin, which is Chachmas Yiritzein, Chachmas Minas B'daitei. And this source, in other words, once it starts evolving, once it starts manifesting, this is already, he's dealing with the Mokir, which eventually, the beginning of the manifestation of Hashem's Chayis. There you already call it Almei Dizgalia, the revealed worlds. Umatronisa, which is literally called the queen. Other places, Matronisa would be the Unterfir, but in this case, it would be the feminine dimension of the structure of Atzilus, starting from Bina, but namely Malchus, because Malchus becomes the Malchuscha, as mentioned, Bina, as the Alter Rebbe explains this in Higeres HaKodesh, the connection of Bina to Malchus, but the Malchus becomes Malchuscha, Malchus Kolilam, that's already the energy which gives life, and again, detailed life into all the elements and all the creations within the elements. And then therefore it's called Emetata, the lower, here, the lower world, the lower mother, because you have it again in Yud Kei Vav Kei, you have the two Heys. The Eme'ilah, the supreme mother, would be Bina, which is the feminine dimension within the in the cognitive world. Chachma Bina. And then you have Emetata, which is the lower Hey, which is the Malchus, as opposed to Zah, as opposed to the six Midas. Because the Alter Rebbe, again, this is a combination, his expression over here is a combination of the Alter Rebbe writes in Sharich and Memuna. And later in Higeres HaKodesh, toward one of the first Higeres of the Alter Rebbe, in the later part of Tanya, he explains the connection, for that matter, of Emetata and Eme'ilah. But here we're dealing with the Emetata, the actual Malchus, which eventually becomes the Malchus Chamalchus Kolilamim. And again, another name to it would be Shechina. And why would it be Shechina? Similar to the same spirit. What's the point of Shechina? It enters, it already dwells, and it already gets involved, if you will. Hashem Shemokar Zeu Reishi says Galas himself. Hashem Mamshech Omeir Leilam, this source is the beginning of the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he's drawn and shines into Olamis, into the multiple worlds. And we say multiple, as we said, there's Adin Ketz, infinite amount of Olamis, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the Bekocha Mamash, in the very beginning of the Bekocha Mamash. If you remember, the Alter Rebbe says even the Mamali Kolam dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to say, is fused with the Sev of Kolam, with the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Olamis, which is a product of Mamali Kolam, also come in a manner of Ein Sof, like we mentioned there. We spoke about it there when it comes to Malachim, even Olamis, the Alter Rebbe used the Lashon Ribui Olamis Ein Loi Kates Ugvul Gaveya Me'al Gaveya. So all this which comes into Olamis, just parenthetically saying this over here, just to understand, we say Olamis is not just a few. You're talking about Ein Kates of Olamis, but is Gili in a revealed manner. And from this source, that not only comes into Eilumus, but it goes on and vitalizes and gives the attention to every single detail within the entire creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, starting from the sublime and supreme creations of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eilam HaBriya, the Neshamas, the Malachim, Gelina Tachni, and Eliyim. Every detail receives its Chayir B'Chayis Prati, its light and its specific energy, which is fitted to it. And it continues to reside in it and invest in it to continue to give them life. Therefore, it's called the mother of the children. And again, that attention of the mother to children, and so to, and it's called also Knesset Yisrael, also the ingathering of Yisrael, of Yid. What's the connection of Knesset Yisrael? We're talking about Malchus, we're talking about the Eibishter, which is Mahav Machayim Mekayim, this part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which becomes manifest and evolved into Eilumus and Yivraim. What's the connection of Knesset Yisrael? So many places it says in Kabbalah and Chassidus that Malchus Shechina, and this is tantamount to the place, so to say. This is tantamount to the idea of Knesset Yisrael. Why so? From this source is created not only Eilumus, but this source is created the source of this. So the source creates also. Becomes the source rather of all the neshamas. And what neshamas? Even neshamas Atzilus, and even neshamas the Bria. In other words, from this source you have the emanation of the neshamas of Atzilus, and then you have the emanation of the neshamas of Bria, and therefore it's called Knesset Yisrael, the ingathering of Yidden. What is the connection to the word Knesset? Because when you say you gather, every Yidden are dispersed, and you say there's Knesset Yisrael as an example, the ingathering, as they all come together as one group. So they could come together as one group after they are dispersed, and then they come together, Hachnasa, Knesset. But then you have the Knesset Yisrael prior to them dispersing, or prior to Neshamas becoming an entity on their own, individually. If it's a Neshamas Atzilus, eventually Neshamas the Bria, it's where they're grouped together as Knesset Yisrael, because this as well, even this is the shadish, the source of everything else of Eilumus, Hashem's Eilumus, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah, but deeper dimension within Malchus, and it has to be deeper because we know the Neshamas are not just another part of creation. A Nef and Neshama is a Chelik Kamimal. It has within it the Beire energy, the Matzil energy, the creator energy, emanator energy. But nonetheless, it ultimately unfolds the neshama, specific neshama that Atzilus, neshama de Bria. So it's also, therefore, on that very level of that source, which would ultimately become the Malchus Chomachos Kol Olamim, a much deeper dimension of that. But yet, the similarity is that it also becomes the source of the unfolding of the neshamas, naturally in a deeper level, because we're talking about the neshamas. But also, he says this is the same area where things start evolving. That's the similarity, just like Malchus Chamachos Kol Olamim, the Malchus, the way it's in Atzilus, and then eventually becomes the entering into Bria, and again becoming the source, which is Mahav Machayim Mekayim, everything which gives life and existence to all the Eilumus. And it's spoken a number of times as Malchus, the way it's still in Atzilus, the way the Malchus becomes a Sheder Shemakar, the Keser of Bria, becomes the source of Bria. As the Lashon brought many times Alter Rebbe, Batitin Teref Levesa, it's Laila, in other words, it enters into a place which Elokus is not that manifest. That's the whole point of Malchus. But at any level of Malchus, in the end of the day, even the Malchus, the way it's in Atzilus, it's ultimately the source of being a source to something else, starts forming within Malchus itself. Again, we don't say starts in the context of time, but this is what Malchus is. Like the Kayach of Dibur, there's a time that the person speaks, which is already speaking Malchus Perish, Teish Bapekarin Allah, like we says in Pasuk Eliyah, speech is aligned with Malchus. The idea of speech is already about relating something which is going on within the person, out of the person, to others, other entities. So even before the person speaks, it's the Kayach of Dibur. It's there as an expression in relation to others. In other words, it's there as a kayach which would relate the information of the person's inside to the outside, and so too within Malchus, any level of Malchus. Malchus is about the beginning of becoming a Shadish and Makar, a source to other things. So there's other things, the way it's associated with Hashem's creation. And then the Kaviyachal there is the evolution of Neshamis. Hashem is the emanating, Hashem's creating, so to say, Neshamis, which is different than Neshamis, that Tzilus, Neshamis, the Bria. The source, the Knesset Yisrael, prior to the development of the Neshamis, that's also aligned with that same Lashon of Eim Abanim, Shechina, Knesset Yisrael, and so on. But the Kulan, in the end of the day, this is all a hispashtus. In other words, the way the Chayis evolves from this source, which is called Shechina. Just like the evolution and the expansion, or rather the expression of the light coming from the sun. However, the Shechina is now the Alter Rebbe goes back. What about the Shechina itself, which is the very beginning, which the Eibush of the Gilui and of the Reishis HaGilui, right, the beginning of the revelation and the source and the root of the revelation, which Hashem shines to the Elimis in a revealed manner, which is the source of all this, which ultimately will evolve and give life and existence to all the Elimis. As he says in the brackets, that everything is only light which comes from it. Like the sun, the light which comes from the sun. However, the core, the Shechina itself, the world cannot comprehend and to receive the light of Hashem's dwelling, Hashem's dwelling, which Hashem Shechina that it should dwell and invest in it. It cannot come in without any garment which would cover up over the intensity of the air. That because if Hashem's Shechina would be manifest the way it is, again, namely the way when we say Shechina over here, we mean basically the core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in its alignment with the Shechina, which, if that would shine, we have to just make no mistake. When we're talking about Perek Nun Beis, you see in one hand he's talking about the Shechina, which is already the level which is Sheikh and Mislabish, and all of a sudden he says that needs a lavush. Apparently it already entered into the system. Again, you learn Perek Nun Beis, it could be confusing. It already entered into Hashem's Meichin. And then it's ready, so to say, they're ready to evolve from this Meichin Kaviyachal V'Kodesh Baruch Hu, similar to the nerve system, and ultimately would evolve into all the details, as we have in the metaphor and the mashal, all the limbs and koiches, faculties of the body. And so too when Hashem enters Aviyachal Chachma, so to say, it's ready to evolve. But he says over here, this core, the Shechina in this context means without, he kind of introduces the Shechina with the message of the Shechina to be Mahava Machayim Mikayim prior to entering into the Meichin. So he's tying, so to say, the word Shechina over here to the core of this of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to say, prior to entering into the system, but yet with a desire to enter into the system. This is the context of Shechina over here. Because if you see over here, if you look into the words over here, he goes back to the levush of the Meichin, even though he said it already. So this is and let's see it clearly, because if that would be there, everything would be batul. If that would be manifest, everything would be batul, completely annulled. Wouldn't be any possibility for any evolving of Elamis or creation of Elamis. To what extent can be let Hashemesh b'mkeid b'guf Hashemesh? Just like the bittul, the annulment of the light of the sun in its source. To what extent would we have that bittul? In other words, the nothingness of Elamis, the inability of Elamis to evolve and to be created, to even be emanated, nothing at all. You would only have the Shechina itself, meaning to say, similar to the mashal over here, this mashal, the Eira Shemesh, the ray of the sun, the way it is in the ball of the sun. As Alter Rebbe has this also early in Likutei Amarim, where he speaks about the bittul of Eilamis lagabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the annulment of Eilamis in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not that they are just a bit and subtly and nonetheless HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so overwhelming. The bittul is in a state of not completely. As the Alter Rebbe explains there, the ray of the sun, and he makes a cheshbon, makes a calculation. He says if the ray of the sun is out of the ball of the sun, how much more so it's within the bottle of the sun. Again, we learned this and explained it, as you can see the chapters that speak about this mashal. But when it's in the ball of the sun, it's completely nothing, is no thing at all. Not even a subtle ray, because it's overwhelmed by the core of the sun. And so too the Alter Rebbe says, if this Gilui would be revealed, everything would be batal. How much batal? Completely batal. It's a state of nothingness at all. So it wouldn't be Eilamis, and it wouldn't be even El Matzilus and Bri Yitzir, and certainly not the inferior Eilamis. It'd be completely nothing, is nothing at all. And we're talking about Hashem being Mahava Machayim Mekayim. So we go back to this, which the Alter Rebbe says, kind of you're dealing with a bit of the core of the nefesh, that it needs to go through again that interface, which is Meichin, in order to come into the system. So the Alter Rebbe goes back and he says, yes, Shechina in this context, it's not after after it enters into the Meichin and then it becomes the Shechina, which is eventually will evolve to be Hashem becoming this emanator and creator and so on. So he goes back and he says, in other words, Abba Shechina Atzma, the words of Shechina Atzma on top of the page, he's going back, he says, the Shechina means the message of the Shechina. To be sheikhin and to get involved without entering into the meichin, nothing would ever be able to exist. Similar to the nefesh, had it come into the system, not entering through the meichin, nothing would be able to function. So you do see Kaviyachol, so to say, the Alter Rebbe is not jumping back and forth. He's just trying to point out, to bring this message home. As you can see from the subsequent words, I thought he invested already in Chochmah Bina Das. What is this levush? Why is it bringing this levush over here? Because the beginning of the page Shechina Atzmi says, let's step back. The concept of the Shechina, as Hashem wants to enter into Eilamis. Yet without that levush, without that meichin, which would be the interface between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Eilamis, nothing would be able to exist. So he overall says it in a general manner, but he says the Shechina Atzma. But obviously when you say the word Shechina, it's already the Sheikh in Mislabeshes and the Eim Habonim Knesset Yisrael. That's already all the way after the step, and again, of Malchus, or the domain of Malchus, which after it entered into the Meichin. So why would he come to this conclusion? Because the Alter Rebbe is really saying from the beginning of Perek Ayin Gimel, the Shechina Atzma Shireshus Agilui, you see Masha Ein Sof Baruch Hu Meir La'Eilamis again. You see introduces Ein Sof Baruch Hu, but I thought it's the Shechina, so it's not Ein Sof. One way or another. No, because the Alter Rebbe says the message of the Shechina, of Hashem desiring to create and emanate and be Mahava Machayim Mekayim, all the elements with its full level of potency. He Efshel Eilamis Lizba. Nothing, it wouldn't comprehend. It wouldn't be able to tolerate. So it would be a state of nothing. Nothing would have been created. We say nothing is no thing at all, and that's why you see the Alter Rebbe goes back to the lavush. What is the garment? You see clearly the Alter Rebbe is going back over here. What is the garment that could cover up and conceal and enclose and nothing would ultimately be batel in the great light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To what extent be batel b'mitzias? As we said before, that's pre-Hashem entering into that interface, which would be Meichin. He says, this is Ritzaynei Yisbarach v'Chochmasei, which he goes back to the Ratzin Hashem and the Chochmasei v'Kodesh Baruch Hu Chulu, which would be Nasa v'Daitei. Amrubashim v'Teira Mitzvahs Aniklas Lani, which is invested in Teira and Mitzvahs, which are revealed to us, Levaneinu, and our children. Because they Raisa Mechochma Nafkas. He Chochma Le'ela, He Chochma Ilah, He Chochma Ilah. We'll stop over here, because he continues, the Le'ela, Mamad Yizgala, which Hashem will pick up. But what he's saying again, this is when we want to define Teira, Teira Mechochma Nafkas. Teira is Chochmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't need to learn Kabbalah or Chassidus for this. And ask anybody to understand. Everybody understands. Teira is Chochmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then he brings us a Raisa Mechochma Nafkas. That is the core nerve system, the core brain, Kaviyach. which allows the Kodesh Baruch Hu's energy to ultimately evolve into Eilamis, because this is not just another faculty. This is core faculty. And this is Chochmasei, Binasei, Bedaite. This is a sensitive area, as we can appreciate it the way it is by man. And therefore by man that becomes the interface, the way the nefesh enters into the system of the body. As again, we could all appreciate the maximum sensitivity and uniqueness of the meichin of the brain and the entire nerve system. So too, Kaviyachol, Hashem, it becomes manifest in Eilamis, and there's the involvement of Hashem's chayis and light, energy and light, to bring life and energy into all the Eilamis. It goes through the Chochmas V'Nasa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ultimately is the Torah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mitzvahs. Teiraisa Mechochma Nafkas, Torah coming from Chochma. Have